My boyfriend secretly tested my loyalty for 2 years, manipulating my life and filming every interaction. The truth shattered everything. Just 3 weeks ago, my entire world shattered. I uncovered that my partner, Hayes, had been secretly commissioning individuals to gauge my faithfulness. It wasn't an isolated incident. This had been occurring for 2 solid years. His circle of friends, random men at various venues, even anonymous DMs I dismissed as mere attention-seeking, all were working under his direction, scrutinizing my responses. He meticulously recorded my reactions, then replayed them for his friends, analyzing my every move like a sports highlights reel. SFX, low, uneasy hum. I'm going to attempt to recount this without completely unraveling, but honestly, I've been a wreck since this revelation, questioning the authenticity of my past 2 years. Hayes and I first crossed paths at a friend's birthday celebration in Louisville during early 2023. My friend, Stacy, was turning 27, and she'd booked a private area at a small downtown establishment. Hayes attended with one of Stacy's colleagues, and we ended up conversing for approximately 3 hours straight. He possessed a witty charm and a slightly awkward demeanor that I found endearing. What truly stood out was his remarkable memory for small details I mentioned. For example, I might express my fondness for breakfast foods, and then a couple of weeks later, he'd send me a photograph of elaborate waffles he'd prepared, adorned with an artistic fruit arrangement. Cut to B-roll, smiling couple, then quick cut to calendar pages flipping. The initial few months were wonderful. He was attentive, remembered my mother's name, inquired about my sister Flora's wedding preparations, and even brought me warm soup when I was unwell. All the gestures that make you wonder, could this person truly be different? We formalized our relationship around May 2023, and things progressed rapidly. By that autumn, we were essentially cohabiting at his place, dividing our time between his apartment and mine, though mostly at his because he boasted a larger kitchen, and I enjoy cooking. Reflecting now, I can pinpoint the exact moment the peculiar occurrences began. However, at the time, I gave them no particular thought. It was roughly 6 months into our relationship, around the holiday season. We were at a sports bar, watching a game with some of his acquaintances. Hayes briefly stepped away to use the restroom, and one of his buddies, a guy named Wade, started behaving very flirtatiously with me. I mean, overtly flirtatious, commenting on my attire, asking if I exercised, remarking on Hayes's good fortune to have such a beautiful partner. I simply laughed it off and changed the topic, because what else is one supposed to do when your boyfriend's friend acts strangely? When Hayes returned, I later mentioned that Wade had been a bit much. Hayes merely shrugged and stated that Wade was always like that with everyone. I should have questioned why Hayes didn't appear bothered in the slightest. If a friend of mine were hitting on my partner, I'd anticipate some sort of reaction. But I simply assumed Hayes felt secure in our connection and didn't perceive Wade as a genuine threat. Then it recurred. A different friend, a new environment. We were at Hayes' apartment for a casual gathering, and his friend Carl cornered me in the kitchen as I was getting a drink. Carl began asking if I was content with Hayes, if I ever considered being with someone else, if I found Hayes attractive. I shut down that line of questioning immediately, reiterating my commitment to Hayes and my lack of interest, then walked away. I also informed Hayes about this encounter, and he wore an inscrutable expression I couldn't quite decipher. He claimed Carl was undergoing a difficult period and likely just seeking affirmation. I recall finding that a peculiar response, but I dismissed it, not wanting to ignite tension within his social circle. The truth is, these episodes continued. Not constantly, but frequently enough that I began to wonder if something was inherently wrong with me. Was I unconsciously sending signals? Was I being overly friendly? I actually started modifying my behavior around Hayes' friends, anxious that someone might misinterpret my intentions. Visual theory, close up on uneasy facial expression. There was one specific evening at a downtown bar, perhaps 8 months into our relationship. Hayes had gone to fetch our beverages, and a man approached, sitting beside me. He was attractive, self-assured, the kind of person who typically attracts women easily. He initiated conversation, inquired if I was there alone, and offered to buy me a drink. I explained I was with my partner, but he persisted, stating my boyfriend was foolish to leave me unattended, even asking for my number, just in case. I felt intensely uncomfortable. I kept glancing towards the bar, trying to catch Hayes' gaze, but he was turned away, engrossed in conversation with the bartender. Finally, I firmly told the man I wasn't interested and relocated to a different table. When Hayes reappeared, I described what had transpired. He seemed concerned, yet simultaneously almost satisfied. That's the only descriptor I can conjure, as if he'd just received welcome news. I understand how that sounds now, but at the time, I merely believed he was relieved I had managed the situation effectively. The direct messages began surfacing around our first anniversary. Anonymous accounts started contacting me on Instagram with increasingly provocative content. "Hello, beautiful, you're too stunning to be with only one person, your boyfriend doesn't deserve you." Some were subtle, others explicitly explicit. I blocked most of them and mentioned the more egregious ones to Hayes. He consistently offered the same advice: social media is riddled with peculiar individuals, and I should simply disregard them. But here's what truly gnaws at me: some of those messages arrived with suspiciously precise timing. For instance, I'd post a photo of dinner with Hayes, and within hours, a message would appear from a random account. Or I'd upload a selfie, and suddenly 3 different accounts would flood my inbox. I never connected the dots, because why would I? SFX, rapid typing, then a ping notification, then there was the gym situation. I started attending a fitness center close to Hayes' apartment, and coincidentally, a man named Dennis consistently appeared at the same time. He was initially pleasant, engaging in light conversation about workouts and general topics. However, over time, his inquiries became more personal, touching on my relationship, mentioning that his friend found me attractive. Eventually, he outright asked if I would ever consider dating someone else. I informed Hayes about Dennis, and Hayes suggested I find a different gym. Yet, he never appeared angry or even slightly envious, just calm, almost pragmatic. The online intrusions also intensified. I use a few friend-finding applications, like Bumble BFF, since relocating to Louisville and not knowing many people. However, random men started matching with me on the standard Bumble, despite the fact I had never activated that section of my profile. When I explained I had a boyfriend, they would still press, asking if I was absolutely certain, insisting they could treat me better. I began to seriously believe something was wrong with me. Was there a neon sign above my head proclaiming "approach me"? I confided in Stacy, and she reassured me, saying some women simply attract more attention, and I shouldn't worry. My sister, Flora, echoed the sentiment. Everyone offered a logical explanation for why I had suddenly become irresistible to every persistent male in Kentucky. Throughout all this, Hayes remained the quintessential partner. He was supportive when I voiced complaints about the unwanted advances, protective when I felt uncomfortable, and understanding when I preferred to stay home rather than go out because I was tired of men approaching me. Do you grasp the twisted irony of this? He was actively creating the very problems, then positioning himself as my savior for helping me navigate them. I must tell you about our trip to Nashville, because that's when things escalated in a way I only recently comprehended. We spent a long weekend there, staying at a pleasant hotel downtown. Hayes claimed he needed to take a work call the first evening, so I ventured down to the hotel bar alone. Within 15 minutes, 2 men were attempting to buy me drinks, and a third invited me to dance. I felt so overwhelmed that I texted Hayes to come rescue me, and we returned to our room. He was incredibly sweet about it. He held me as I described how draining it was to constantly be propositioned. He told me he admired how I consistently rebuffed them and always returned to him. Meanwhile, he was literally compensating the very individuals who had just harassed me. I want to scream just recalling that. Quote, my happiness was built on his lies. After Nashville, the tests grew more elaborate. A man named Enrique began working at my office. He was exceptionally friendly, always fabricating reasons to engage me in conversation. Eventually, he asked if I'd like to grab lunch sometime, just the 2 of us. I informed him I had a partner, and he backed off, but continued with subtle flirtations, complimenting my hair, bringing me coffee, remembering small things I'd mentioned. I informed Hayes about Enrique, and Hayes remarked that it sounded like Enrique had a crush. But as long as I wasn't encouraging it, there was nothing to be concerned about. So, I continued to work alongside this man, who, unbeknownst to me, was apparently on my boyfriend's payroll the entire time. The event that finally exposed everything was Hayes' friend, Billy. Billy had been a part of Hayes' social circle since their college days, and I'd always perceived him as a decent person. A bit reserved, tending to stay in the background at group gatherings, but pleasant enough. He visited our home a few weeks ago when Hayes was meant to be there, but was held up at work. Billy and I were simply relaxing, watching television, nothing out of the ordinary. Then Billy grew noticeably quiet and revealed he needed to share something, but I couldn't let Hayes know he was the one who told me. I initially assumed he was about to confess romantic feelings, and I was already mentally preparing my polite "I'm flattered, but I'm with Hayes" rejection speech. Instead, Billy informed me that Hayes had been staging loyalty assessments on me for the duration of our relationship. I actually laughed at first because, what? That's utterly preposterous. Who behaves like that? But Billy continued speaking. He recounted the sports bar incident involving Wade, that Hayes had instructed Wade to flirt with me and observe my reaction. He detailed Carl's encounter in the kitchen, explaining it was the same scenario. He spoke of the random men at bars, the unsolicited DMs, the guys at both gyms, the Nashville episode, Enrique at my job, every single detail. Each instance I believed I was being randomly approached by an interested man was actually someone Hayes had either directly instructed or explicitly paid to evaluate my fidelity. SFX, distorted, echoey voices. I sat there for approximately 10 minutes, completely silent, my mind struggling to process the information. Billy confessed that he had initially participated. Hayes had asked him to flirt with me early on, but Billy found it too unsettling and withdrew. However, he had witnessed Hayes recruiting other individuals. He had seen Hayes hand cash to strangers in bars to approach me. He had watched Hayes show his other friends videos of me rejecting these advances, treating it like some form of highlight reel. Yes, the videos. Hayes had been recording me, not himself, but through the men he dispatched. They would film my responses on their phones and transmit the footage to Hayes. Hayes would then view these recordings, share them with his circle, comment on how I handled each scenario, and assign a loyalty rating based on some arbitrary scale only he comprehended. Billy confessed he couldn't endure it any longer. He said that watching me at their gatherings, being kind and trusting, completely unaware that everyone in the room was privy to these tests, made him feel sick. He emphatically stated, "You deserve to know the truth." I inquired of Billy how many people were aware of this scheme. He responded, all of Hayes' closest friends, Wade, Carl, several others. They've all either played a role or observed it unfolding. They've all seen the recordings. I pressed him for a reason. Why would Hayes do such a thing? Billy explained that Hayes had a previous girlfriend who had been unfaithful, and it had deeply scarred him. He said Hayes had confided in everyone that he needed to be certain of my trustworthiness before he could fully commit. He also claimed Hayes genuinely believed this was a justifiable course of action, that scrutinizing me was his method of self-preservation, and observing me successfully navigate these tests allowed him to love me. I felt an urge to vomit. Hayes arrived home about an hour after Billy departed. He entered as if everything were normal, greeted me with a kiss, inquired about dinner preferences, and I simply stared at him, trying to grasp the true identity of this individual. I didn't confront him that night. I needed time to reflect. I needed to process. I needed to ascertain what part of the last 2 years of my life had even been real. I spent 3 days feigning normalcy while my entire reality crumbled around me. I meticulously replayed every memory, searching for clues. Every instance a man approached me, every moment of discomfort, every time I returned to Hayes, feeling grateful to have a partner who wasn't possessive or domineering. He wasn't not possessive. He was the architect of those encounters. On the 3rd day, I could no longer tolerate it. Hayes was preparing breakfast, discussing some show he wanted us to watch, and I simply uttered the words. I asked him about the tests. His expression went utterly blank for approximately 3 seconds. Then he asked what I was referring to. I informed him I knew about Wade and Carl, the men at the bars, the DMs, the gyms, Nashville, Enrique, every single detail. I told him I knew about the videos. I told him I knew his friends were all aware. Hayes set down the spatula and simply stood there, looking at me. His next question was, "Who informed you?" Not a denial, not confusion, not an inquiry of, "What are you talking about?" His immediate concern was identifying the person who had exposed his secret. I stated that the source of the information was irrelevant. What mattered was that he had been conducting a twisted experiment on my loyalty for 2 years. And here's the part that still makes me feel utterly irrational. Hayes did not apologize. He exhibited no shame. He attempted to rationalize his actions. He told me I couldn't possibly comprehend the depth of his past hurt. He claimed his ex had eroded his capacity for trust. He maintained that these evaluations were his sole means of feeling secure. He asserted that every time I successfully passed a test, it deepened his affection for me. He informed me he intended to cease the tests once we became engaged, as by then he would possess absolute certainty. I asked him if he heard himself, if he understood how utterly insane his words sounded. He grew irritated with me. He accused me of exaggerating. He declared he had never caused me harm. He insisted he was simply ensuring I was who I presented myself to be. He even suggested most men would be flattered to have a girlfriend who repeatedly demonstrated such unwavering fidelity. I then questioned him about the videos, the recordings of me being approached by strangers that he had secretly made and shared with his friends. He contended that they were merely proof, evidence that his tests were effective. He expressed pride in how I handled myself and wanted to show his friends how loyal his girlfriend was. As if I were a trained animal performing tricks. As if my discomfort served as entertainment. As if my personal privacy being violated was a source of pride. I asked how many videos existed. He said he wasn't precisely sure. Perhaps 30 or 40. Spanning the entire course of our relationship. Different bars, varied situations, different men evaluating me in distinct ways. I inquired about the current location of these videos. He grew defensive and stated they were on his phone and laptop. When I requested to view them, he refused. He declared them to be private. Private videos of me, captured without my consent, which he had displayed to who knows how many people, were suddenly private from me. I informed him I needed space to think. He consented but claimed I was being unfair. He insisted he acted out of love. He said if I truly understood his past trauma with his ex, I would comprehend his motivations. I've been staying at Stacy's for over a week now. Hayes continues to text me, insisting we need to converse in person. That if I would just allow him to explain properly, I would grasp his perspective. He claims our entire relationship was founded on trust, and my departure proves I didn't trust him as much as he trusted me. Stacy advises me to never speak to him again. My sister Flora believes I should at least hear him out, arguing that 2 years is a significant commitment to discard. My mother doesn't know the full narrative, because how does one even begin to explain something like this? I'm completely unsure what to do. Billy texted me yesterday asking if I was alright. He said Hayes knows someone betrayed him and is attempting to discover who. He cautioned me to be careful, as Hayes has rallied all their mutual friends, and they are closing ranks. What does that even signify? What more is there to uncover? How much deeper does this go? And the most unsettling thought I cannot dispel is this. What if I had failed one of his evaluations? What if a random man had approached me on an off day? What if I had been too amicable or too slow to dismiss in advance? Would Hayes have used that as justification to end our relationship? Would he have exhibited those videos to everyone as proof that women cannot be relied upon? I feel as though I was a specimen in some cruel experiment I never consented to participate in. I am scheduled to meet Hayes tomorrow to talk. He says he wants to clear the air and help me understand. I don't know what I anticipate hearing, but I need something. Some explanation that lends coherence to this situation. Some version of events where the man I believed I loved isn't a complete enigma. But I'm increasingly convinced that person never truly existed. I suspect the real Hayes observed me from behind a camera lens this entire time, scrutinizing my performance, judging my worthiness. I will provide an update following our conversation. Update, okay, so I met with Hayes, and I have a great deal to share with you all. First, I want to extend my gratitude to everyone who commented on my previous post. I read every single one, even if I couldn't respond to all of them. Many of you cautioned me against meeting him alone, and I heeded that advice. Stacy accompanied me and remained in her car in the parking lot. I had shared my location with her and instructed her to come inside if I didn't text her every 30 minutes. Some of you believed I was foolish for even granting him an opportunity to explain. Perhaps you're correct, but I needed to face him directly and comprehend what the hell had happened to my life over the past 2 years. I desperately needed answers, even if they were painful. We convened at a diner near my old apartment, the one I relinquished when I essentially moved in with him. Neutral ground, a public venue. I arrived early and selected a booth where I had a clear view of the entrance. Hayes walked in, appearing completely normal. That's what truly unsettled me. He displayed no nervousness, no guilt, none of the emotions one would expect from someone just exposed for orchestrating a 2-year manipulation scheme on his girlfriend. He slid into the booth opposite me and immediately reached for my hands, as if we were merely there to resolve a minor disagreement. I withdrew my hands and told him to start speaking. He launched into an elaborate narrative about needing me to grasp his perspective. How his former partner, Rosalie, had irrevocably damaged his capacity for trust. How she had been unfaithful for months with someone he considered a friend, and he had been completely oblivious. How that discovery had shattered something within him that he didn't know how to mend. I told him that was awful, and I sympathized with his past pain, but it did not justify transforming our relationship into some grotesque game show. He adopted an expression that suggested I was being deliberately obtuse, as if I were refusing to acknowledge something self-evident. He asserted it wasn't a game show. It was a measure of protection. It was the sole method he could employ to feel secure enough to love someone again. He claimed every time I successfully navigated a test, it reinforced his trust in me a little more. He stated he was accumulating proof that I differed from Rosalie, that I was a worthwhile risk. I asked him if he truly heard how deranged that sounded, building evidence, as if I were a criminal case he was investigating, rather than a person he was supposed to cherish. He accused me of distorting his words. He said I was portraying him as a monster when his only intention was to safeguard his heart. He suggested most women would be flattered that their boyfriend cared sufficiently to ensure their loyalty. Flattered. Visual CE, close-up on shaking hands. I swear I nearly walked out right then, but I remained because I required more. I needed to grasp the full extent of his actions. I asked him to detail every single test from the very beginning. Hayes actually seemed relieved by my request. As if, finally, I was demonstrating interest in his project. He retrieved his phone and began scrolling through something, and I realized he possessed notes, actual documentation outlining every test he had ever conducted on me. The first one involved Wade at the sports bar. He had instructed Wade to compliment me and observe my reaction. Wade reported that I was polite but uninterested and swiftly redirected the conversation. Hayes marked that down as a pass. The second instance was Carl in the kitchen at that party. Carl was supposed to intensify his efforts, asking more direct questions about my contentment with Hayes. When I firmly shut him down, Hayes recorded it as a strong pass. Then he proceeded to describe the strangers at various establishments. He said he initially used men he knew through work or mutual acquaintances. He would offer them $50 to approach me while he observed from a discreet location nearby. After a few such instances, he began hiring complete strangers, fearing that those he knew might not be sufficiently aggressive in their approach. I asked him how he managed to hire actual strangers to harass his girlfriend. He explained he would seek out confident, charming-looking men in bars or clubs. He'd approach them, outline the situation, and offer cash for them to try their utmost to obtain my number or elicit a flirtatious response from me. Most men found it amusing. Some considered him mad, but accepted the money regardless. I sat there, listening to my boyfriend describe soliciting random men to sexually harass me, as if he were discussing a casual pastime. The direct messages were next. Hayes stated he had created fake Instagram accounts and also compensated a few of his friends to message me from their genuine accounts. He wished to assess how I responded to online attention versus in-person attention. He observed that I was more dismissive online, which he found interesting. I inquired about Enrique, the man at my workplace. Hayes hesitated for a moment, then admitted that Enrique was his cousin. His cousin, whom he had specifically instructed to secure employment at my workplace for the explicit purpose of testing me in a professional environment. He wanted to ascertain if I would behave differently when the attention originated from someone I encountered daily. I cannot adequately convey the profound sense of violation I experienced in that moment. This wasn't merely random men in bars. He had infiltrated my workplace, positioning someone I interacted with daily. Someone who presumably reported back to Hayes on every single exchange we had. I asked what else Enrique had disclosed to him. Hayes revealed that Enrique provided updates on whom I ate lunch with, what I discussed with colleagues, and whether I mentioned Hayes in conversation. He claimed it helped him feel connected to my life when he couldn't personally be present. I told him that amounted to stalking. He had effectively stalked me through his own relative. He accused me of being overly dramatic. He maintained he simply wanted assurance of my fidelity at work, mirroring my faithfulness everywhere else. He added he would have undertaken it himself if possible, but since he couldn't constantly monitor me, he required someone he deemed trustworthy. Trustworthy. His cousin, spying on me, was deemed trustworthy. I asked about the videos again. I insisted I wanted to see them. He refused. He maintained they were private, and he felt uncomfortable showing them to me. Private videos of me, filmed without my consent, which he had shown to countless others, were somehow private from me. I declared I would not leave until I viewed at least some of them. I informed him that if he harbored any hope of salvaging this relationship, he needed to reveal precisely what he had been collecting. He gazed at me for a prolonged period, as if weighing a crucial decision. Then, he unlocked his phone and turned the screen towards me. The first video depicted a bar I recognized. I was seated alone, awaiting Hayes's return from somewhere, and a man approached me. I watched myself offer a polite smile and shake my head. The man continued talking. I observed myself becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, I witnessed myself utter something firm, and the man walked away. Hayes gestured at the screen and urged me to observe my handling of the situation. "Look how direct you were," he proclaimed. "Look how you didn't lead him on or engage in games." He stated this video was among his favorites because it showcased my unequivocal nature. I felt nauseated watching myself on that screen, replaying a moment I remembered as stressful and unpleasant, presented as a highlight reel. He showed me another, and then another. Different bars, different men, different iterations of me being propositioned by strangers while my boyfriend secretly observed and recorded. In some of them, I could see myself scanning the room for Hayes, trying to locate him, utterly unaware that he was the orchestrator of these encounters. I asked who else had viewed these videos. He responded, only his close friends, Wade, Carl, and a few others. He explained they assisted him in analyzing the footage and determining if I had passed or failed. Analyzing the footage as if I were game tape. I asked what occurred when someone failed a test. Hayes asserted I had never failed, so it was irrelevant. I repeated my question, what would have happened if I had failed? He grew visibly uncomfortable and claimed he didn't want to discuss hypotheticals. He said what mattered was that I had consistently proven myself. He insisted I should be proud of my unwavering fidelity. I told him I demanded to know what his plan was if one of these random men he paid had successfully obtained my number or coaxed me into flirting back. He finally confessed he would have ended our relationship. He said he would have shown the video to his friends as proof that women could not be trusted. He said he would have utilized it as evidence that his intuitions about people were correct. So, my entire relationship had been contingent on passing evaluations I was unaware I was even taking. 2 years of my life were a single misstep away from being discarded, simply because my boyfriend couldn't manage his trust issues like a rational adult. I asked him if he ever intended to disclose any of this to me. He said no. He said if we had married, the tests would have ceased, and I would never have known. He claimed he planned to propose the following year once he felt entirely confident. I asked how many tests it would have taken for him to feel confident. He said he didn't know. He figured he would just know when it felt right. So, there was no ultimate objective. No finish line. I could have married this man, still perpetually being tested and remaining completely ignorant. Quote, love shouldn't be an endless audition. I informed him I was finished. I told him his actions constituted a complete violation of my trust, my privacy, and my autonomy. I told him he had transformed our relationship into a surveillance operation, and I could not be with someone who viewed me as a subject to be studied rather than a partner to be cherished. That's when the conversation turned ugly. Hayes began accusing me of betrayal. He claimed I was the untrustworthy one because I couldn't handle knowing the extent of his affection for me. He asserted that a genuine partner would comprehend that he acted out of a fear of being hurt again. He declared I was validating his belief that women abandon relationships the moment things become challenging. I told him this wasn't challenging. This was abuse. He had emotionally manipulated me for 2 years and recorded it for his amusement. He erupted when I used the word abuse. He started speaking louder, and other patrons began to stare. He insisted I had no comprehension of what abuse entailed. He claimed he had never physically harmed me, never dictated whom I saw or where I went, never done anything but love me and attempt to protect himself. He said labeling him abusive was precisely the kind of overreaction he had been concerned about. I told him he absolutely did control where I went. He controlled it by rendering certain places unbearable for me. Every bar became a site of harassment. Every gym transformed into a place where men wouldn't leave me alone. He had engineered a world where I was perpetually uncomfortable unless I was in his presence. He actually paused at that, as if it had never dawned on him that his tests might have unintended consequences. I told him I had spent months agonizing, believing something was inherently wrong with me, wondering why I attracted so much unwanted attention, feeling guilty for being friendly, lest I was inadvertently inviting it. I told him I had altered my behavior, my attire, my entire mode of interaction with the world because of situations he had manufactured. He claimed he didn't intend for that to happen. He said the tests were meant to be straightforward and isolated. He hadn't realized they were impacting my emotional well-being. I asked how he could be so obtuse, how he could observe his girlfriend becoming increasingly anxious about male attention and fail to connect it to the fact that he was literally compensating men to direct unwanted attention towards her. He said he thought I was simply sensitive. He reasoned that some women naturally received more attention than others, and I was one of them. He said it never occurred to him that his manipulations were the root cause. I asked if he was serious, if he genuinely hadn't made that connection. He said he was solely focused on the outcomes, not the methodology. He was only concerned with whether I passed or failed, not with how the tests were interfering with my daily existence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to overturn the table. I wanted to make him understand what it felt like to be pursued by strangers in your own city while your boyfriend watched and meticulously documented everything. Instead, I simply told him we were over. I instructed him to delete every video and never contact me again. He grabbed my wrist as I began to stand up. He insisted I couldn't simply abandon 2 years as if they meant nothing. He declared his love for me and claimed his actions were solely driven by that love. He stated that if I left now, I would be substantiating all his fears about women. I pulled my arm away and informed him that was his burden, not mine. I told him he required professional therapy, not a girlfriend. I warned him that if he contacted me again, I would consider it harassment. I walked out and collapsed into Stacy's car, completely falling apart. That occurred 5 days ago. Since then, Hayes has texted me 32 times. I counted. Some messages contain apologies. Some are accusations. Some are lengthy, rambling explanations for his actions and why I should empathize. Some are furious diatribes about how I am abandoning him, just as Rosalie did. I haven't responded to any of them. Billy texted me to confirm that Hayes suspects he was the informant and is trying to pinpoint who. Apparently, Hayes has been interrogating all his friends, desperately trying to identify the leak. Billy fears he will be exposed and lose his entire social circle. Here's what's truly unsettling me, though. I confided everything to my sister, Flora, the complete narrative. She listened intently, then made a comment that has been gnawing at me ever since. She asked if Hayes had ever actually hurt me during the relationship. She pointed out that before I knew about the tests, I was happy. She suggested that perhaps his methods were flawed, but the outcome was that I felt loved and secure. She questioned whether the harm lay in his actions or in the subsequent knowledge of them. I don't know how to answer that. I was happy before I knew. I felt safe. I felt loved. I genuinely believed I had a healthy relationship with a good man. But that happiness was constructed upon falsehoods. That sense of security was engineered by the very person making me feel unsafe. That affection was contingent on my satisfactory performance in tests I was unaware of taking. Does my ignorance diminish the reality of the manipulation? My mother finally heard the complete account from Flora, and she's furious. Not at Hayes, but at me. She believes I am needlessly discarding a good relationship over something that, technically, didn't impact me until I became aware of it. She repeatedly asserts that men often have trust issues, and that at least Hayes addressed his in a way that didn't directly cause me pain. She asked what I would have preferred, a jealous boyfriend who monitored my every move, or one who discreetly verified my loyalty without my knowledge. Neither, Mom. I would have preferred a normal boyfriend who doesn't conduct surveillance operations on his partner. But her reaction is causing me to second-guess myself. Am I overreacting? Hayes never physically assaulted me. He never shouted at me. He never dictated who I could see or where I could go. He simply observed me from behind the scenes, like some puppet master ensuring I danced to his tune. Is that abuse, or is it merely extreme insecurity? Where exactly is the boundary? Stacy is the sole person unequivocally on my side. She constantly reminds me that consent is paramount. That I never agreed to be filmed. That I never agreed to be evaluated. That the violation resides in him stripping away my ability to make informed decisions about my own relationship. But even she questioned if I was certain about ending things entirely. She suggested Hayes clearly loves me, albeit in his own distorted manner. She thought perhaps with therapy, he could change. I refuse to be someone's rehabilitation project. I don't want to idly wait while he learns how to love me like a functional human being. I spent 2 years proving myself to him. Now he expects me to wait while he proves he can be better. Why is that my responsibility? Billy texted me again this morning. He said Hayes finally deduced it was him. Someone saw us together at the apartment that day and reported it to Hayes. Billy said Hayes branded him a traitor and declared their friendship over. Billy said he doesn't regret telling me, but he's apprehensive about Hayes' next move. I inquired what he meant by that. Billy mentioned Hayes has a volatile temper when he feels betrayed. He said Hayes had systematically ruined his ex Rosalie's reputation after she cheated. I asked if Hayes intended to do the same to me. Billy admitted he didn't know but advised me to be prepared. He said Hayes is already circulating a narrative where I'm the one who overreacted to something harmless, where his love tests were simply his endearing, eccentric way of expressing affection, where I am the villain for leaving him over nothing. So now, I'm destined to be the crazy ex-girlfriend who couldn't tolerate a minor loyalty check. Fantastic. I'm scheduled to have dinner with my family tomorrow. My mom, my dad, Flora, and her husband. I know it will inevitably devolve into an intervention, with everyone attempting to persuade me to give Hayes another chance. I am not returning to him. I am unequivocally certain of that now. Regardless of what my family says, no matter how many texts he sends, no matter how many people tell me I'm overreacting, I still don't know what to do about the videos, about Enrique at my workplace, about the fact that Hayes' entire social circle has watched recordings of me without my consent for 2 years. Do I possess any legal recourse? Can I compel him to erase the videos? Can I take any action regarding his cousin spying on me at my job? I feel as though my life has been invaded in ways I am still uncovering. Every day, I recall a new interaction, a new moment, and question if it was genuine or merely another test. Last update. So, the family dinner transpired. My mom spent the initial 20 minutes informing me that she had spoken to Hayes on the phone. Yes, she called him without my knowledge. She desired to hear his perspective because, apparently, my version seemed too extreme to be true. Hayes told her the tests were just playful banter between him and his friends. Nothing serious. He claimed I discovered it and sensationalized everything because I was searching for an excuse to depart. He told her he loved me beyond measure and was devastated that I was jeopardizing our future over a misunderstanding. My mom looked at me across the table as if I were a complete stranger. She asked why I was doing this to a man who clearly adored me. She said Hayes had cried on the phone, and she believed him. Flora attempted to remain impartial, but I could sense she leaned towards my mom's viewpoint. She kept repeating that relationships necessitate compromise and that perhaps Hayes' methods were peculiar, but his intentions were good. She asked if I had even attempted to view things from his angle. I completely lost my composure. I informed them about the videos, the 40-plus recordings of me being harassed by men my boyfriend had hired. I told them about Enrique being strategically placed at my workplace. I told them Hayes maintained notes, documenting every test, every outcome, every analysis of my behavior, as if I were a laboratory specimen. My dad had been quiet throughout the meal, but when I mentioned Enrique, he set down his fork and asked me to repeat that. I explained that Hayes' cousin had secured employment at my workplace specifically to monitor me and provide reports. My dad looked at my mom and stated that was not playful banter, that was surveillance. He asked her if she would have been content with him hiring people to trail her for 2 years of their marriage. Mom contended that was different. They were already married. Hayes was merely being cautious before committing. Dad informed her that caution did not involve paying strangers to sexually harass your partner. He stated that if any man had done that to Flora or me, he would have demanded to know. He asked why she was defending someone who treated her daughter like a suspect instead of a partner. That dinner concluded with my mom weeping, Flora attempting to mediate, and my dad finally telling me I was making the correct decision. It was the first time in weeks someone in my family actually said that to me. Hayes appeared at Stacy's apartment 2 days later. I don't know how he located where I was staying, but suddenly, he was simply there at the door. Stacy wasn't home, and I made the foolish choice to let him inside because I wanted to end this face-to-face. He sat on Stacy's couch and immediately launched into how I was ruining both our lives. How everyone was inquiring about my whereabouts, and he was forced to invent excuses. How his friends believed I was being ridiculous, and he concurred with them. I told him I couldn't care less what his friends thought, the same friends who had watched videos of me without my consent for 2 years. The same friends who assisted him in grading my loyalty like a school assignment. He insisted I was misinterpreting the situation. He claimed couples frequently engage in similar behaviors. He cited examples of men who checked their girlfriends' phones, who followed them, who hired actual private investigators. All he had done was assess my faithfulness a few times, and suddenly I was acting as if he had committed a felony. I asked him if he genuinely believed that, if he truly thought compensating dozens of individuals to harass me and secretly recording it was equivalent to glancing at a phone. He became agitated and stood up, starting to pace Stacy's living room, proclaiming I had never understood him. He reiterated that Rosalie had destroyed his capacity for trust, and I was meant to be the one who repaired that. He said he had done everything right with me, and I was punishing him for attempting to protect himself. I told him I was not his therapist or his redemption arc. He simply desired to feel powerful by possessing knowledge about me that I was unaware he held. He wanted to observe my performance of loyalty without my knowing I was performing. He ceased pacing and stared at me. Then he uttered something that finally clarified everything. He told me he had never fully trusted me. Not once in 2 years. He said even when I successfully passed every test, a persistent voice in his head whispered, "She could still turn on you." He stated the tests were never intended to conclude because his fear would never truly dissipate. He said he would have continued testing me indefinitely, even after marriage, even after children, because that was his only path to feeling secure. I asked him why he even desired to be with someone he couldn't trust. He responded that it was because I was perfect, because I consistently passed. Because observing me reject other men repeatedly was the sole factor that made him believe, perhaps someday, he could have faith in me. I told him that wasn't love. That was a prison for both of us. He offered no argument. Then he asked if there was any possibility I would return to him. I said no. I stated I was done being his test subject. I told him he required professional help, and I hoped he sought it, but I wouldn't be present to witness it. He departed without another word. That was a week ago. I haven't heard from him since. Billy informed me Hayes deleted all the videos. I don't know if that's true or if he merely told Billy that. I don't know if I'll ever truly discover the fate of those recordings of me. They could be gone. They could exist on a backup somewhere. They could still be circulating among his social circle. I resigned from my position. I couldn't continue working with Enrique, knowing what he had done. My final day was Friday. I start a new job next month. Stacy helped me retrieve my belongings from Hayes' apartment while he was out. My mother still believes I made a mistake. She texts me articles about forgiveness and second chances. Flora eventually came around. She arrived at Stacy's last week with wine and apologized for her initial lack of support. She said she had discussed Hayes' actions with her husband, and he was appalled. She observed, "Sometimes you don't realize the severity of something until you explain it to an impartial observer. Dad checks in on me every few days. He doesn't say much, but he doesn't need to. He was the only one who believed me immediately, and that means more than I can express. Hayes didn't love me. He loved the concept of a girlfriend who consistently proved her faithfulness. He enjoyed possessing proof that someone could meet his impossible standards. I was never his partner. I was his ongoing project. And the most heartbreaking realization is that I would have married him, never discerning the difference. That's not a genuine connection. That's an endless audition. And I am through performing.